Welcome everyone to Downshift. My name is Paulo.
And my name is Matt, and we are here with the new Lexus GX. This is a car that has the internet and us incredibly excited. So today, we finished our week with it, and we're gonna cover the best and the rest. And we're going to start with the rest, and we're going to talk about engine options, and more specifically what's not here than what is here, because what we have here is actually a pretty good mill. We've started to see it in all of the latest generation F chassis cars. It's the 3.4 liter twin turbocharged V6. Here in the GX now, it makes 349 horsepower. That's up 50 over the previous V8, and 479 pound-feet of torque, which is up over like 100 pound-feet from the V8. So good improvements in power, but the thing is, the other side of that coin is the fact that you're getting only about 19 mpg combined from this engine. So when you start to think that that's really only 2 mpg better than the outgoing V8 with all of its simplicity and longevity and durability, you start to wonder if the gain is really necessary. But with that being said, we do expect to see that hybrid iForce Max that we've seen in the Tundra TRD Pro, Sequoia TRD Pro, and more maybe make its way under the hood here in the coming year, and maybe a more Over Trail Pro version. And then we're going to talk about the third row. Now, I will go ahead and say that I would not spec a third row here. I would get the Over Trail because one, it looks the coolest, and two, it only comes with 2 rows. And the third row, actually, interestingly, so we've got a problem already. It does double hinge, it's mechanical, I do like that, it's a little bit easier to use. And then we get into the third row. Now, remember, the Sequoia, the kind of Toyota counterpart to this, which even is a foot longer than this GX, has like the smallest third row you've ever seen. With this, I actually have decent knee room. Let's see if I can get the seat up to kind of show you. So I actually have relatively decent knee room. The foot space is a little bit high. That's part of this whole live axle, body on frame thing. But you do have a button back here, so you can actually recline the rear seats. It's just not that big. You only have 2 chairs back here, so if you really are going to want a 3-row vehicle from Lexus, I would 100% recommend going with the TX. You do have some USB-C chargers here, and some cup holders, and some vents. But just generally speaking, it's not a great place to spend time. My knees do feel like they're up in my chest. But then we'll move up to the second row, and just like the third row, it's just a little bit small. Again, I would reinforce that this is probably at its optimum in terms of spec with just the 2 rows of seats, because you have a little bit more second row here. Now I'm 6'1", kind of sitting behind where I would sit. It's not that bad, but it's just not quite as good as you would get from like a unibody car, or just maybe the 2-row version of this car. We also don't have a panoramic roof. I believe you said we could get one here.
Yep.
But you do have nice stuff here. You do have a climate zone back here. You've got vents in the, where'd they go? Oh, they're in the ceiling, sorry. They're up here. You do have heated seats back here, USB-Cs, map pockets, and I think you can also get a window shade for your second row on your luxury trims. These seats also do recline, but they don't slide because they're bolted to the floor and hinge to get into the third row. So again, it's fine. It's just not maybe ideal. I would like to see this in the 2-row Over Trail spec. But then switching gears and talking about some of the best stuff about this thing, I really think the styling here is kind of what got everybody excited, and it does remain to be the most exciting part of this car. The rest of the interior is kind of just typical Lexus, but outside you have a load of personality here, very boxy proportions while still being kind of quintessentially Lexus. The spindle grille has been a little bit minimized, and I do like this paint color with the black. It's kind of got like almost a midnight appearance package. On your Over Trails, you will get some skid plates and genuine protection underneath, which I think is going to help quite a bit. But it's typical Lexus fare. You've got your Lexus check LEDs up here. You do have body colored wheel arches. These are, again, kind of like hexagonal or squared off, like you'll see in the Over Trail, but the Over Trail is going to get black plastic or cladding there. You've also got some LEDs worked into the bumpers for your fogs, and also some turning lights, so if you are going to turn at night, this will illuminate the side of the road, so it's easier to see where you're going. This is also the premium trim, not the luxury or the Over Trail, so it does not get the AVS or adaptive suspension. It's a static set, but it works pretty well, and it's pretty comfy. We talk about the wing mirrors here. This looks familiar from like a Jeep Wrangler or an FJ. It's pretty typical right here. We do have a black bar here. You can get a 2-tone roof. We don't have that here, but this is where that would start. And then down the side, we have touch sensitive lock and unlock for your front and rear doors. You've got a running board, and you've got this kind of hump here. From the side, it does look very Defender. It's very classic geometric off-road SUV looking, and I think it looks fantastic. Around the back, it's kind of just clean Lexus, right? You do have the split tailgate. It now goes up, and we'll talk about that more in the trunk. And you do have a button here to release the glass. and of course a full width LED tail bar, Lexus spelled out, and this big bump here because they all come standard with a tow hitch. But overall, I think it looks fantastic. What do you think?
Yeah, I love the look. I agree with you that it is probably the best part about it. They just got the proportions and the dimensions. I love how they shrink the grille up a little bit, and I just love how boxy it looks. And the color spec. It's great.
Now this thing does have style, but it also has loads of substance, and I mentioned that as we were talking about the new chassis. Now this is on the F chassis from Toyota, their new generation body on frame, and that saves a couple 100 pounds of weight, and it also has an increase in 20% rigidity. So you've got a lighter and stronger chassis with more power, and that's going to result in more towing, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But what you get here in the GX is a 10-speed transmission, which we've seen in all the new F chassis vehicles except for the Tacoma, and you also have full-time 4x4 here. You've got a center locking diff for all of your trims, and for your more off-road oriented trims like your Overtrail, you will get a rear locking diff. We will wait and reserve off-road judgment for when we get to have a chance to go behind the wheel with the Overtrail, but here as a package and what you're getting from the ground up, it's pretty solid and hard to argue with. And in tandem with what we were just saying, with the bigger power and the stronger chassis, you do have a tow hitch here as standard. And this thing will tow just over 9,000 pounds. And that is a lot of towing capacity in something that's otherwise a luxury 3-row family SUV. So this thing has loads of muscle. It's going to perform off-road. There's really not anything not to like. And then I have to talk about the way that this thing just simply drives, just goes down the road, because it's kind of bafflingly good. And this is kind of the entry grade. It's the premium, not the luxury, and it is the premium plus, so you get a couple things, but you don't have the adaptive suspension. You can still tell that this is body on frame. It does judder a tiny bit over smaller to medium road imperfections, but the waft and the suppleness that you get from the suspension here, again, not the adaptive, is very, very good. Maybe it borders on the word wallow, but when I do this, it really dives. So there's loads of articulation built into the car, lots of suspension travel, and I think the ride has helped with that. Cabin isolation is really pretty good. When you get to higher speeds, it's kind of the G-Wagon Wrangler thing. You have some vertical-ish glass, and that's what you like from the exterior styling, but that does result in a little bit of wind noise, but it does feel shockingly Lexus. It does feel very good. It's very refined, very luxurious. The power is great. It comes on nice and strong. It's very torquey. I never feel like I'm wanting for power, and it never shouts V8 noises at me. It tells me every time that I get into the throttle that this is a V6. It sounds like it, and I love it for that. So behind the wheel, I'm very pleased. And then in terms of price, you're actually getting a pretty decent package here. Now this thing's closest competition, I would really say, and I think everyone would kind of agree, is the Land Rover Defender. And this thing starts at about $64,250, whereas the Defender 110 for the 2 rows, or 4 doors I should say, starts at about $61,000. But that's for a 4-cylinder engine. If you want to go up to the 6-cylinder, you're looking at about $68,000. So this is still undercutting the Defender by several $1,000s, and I think I might rather have a Lexus. And here on the interior is exactly where you would expect Lexus to shine, and they do. Now remember outside when I said that the exterior styling is the most special part of it? It's kind of the case, because inside here it does feel very familiar Lexus, and in some of the best ways too. A lot of the materials, the leathers, and some of the wood graining here is really high quality. The build is fantastic. There's not really much shake, and this is still a pre-production prototype vehicle. You also don't have any gloss black in here, so everything feels nice and expensive.
This material is like a matte, almost like dark wood?
Yeah, it's somewhere between like an aluminum, like a brushed aluminum, and like a wood, but it works really well. Now, like I said, most of it is pretty standard Lexus stuff, but there are some things that they did change for this GX versus the last thing we were in was like an NX or something. Like for one, you have physical door handles here. No more of the digi stuff, and I think that's kind of nice. Another place that they kind of came back from the technology wave is introducing actual buttons here on the steering wheel rather than having to like use a touch sensitive thing to then correspond to your head-up display. So I like that they've done that here. And then typical things like your, I don't know, tactility of your climate controls. This banner is always on screen here, and you've got heated seat, you've got cooled seat, but you also have climate concierge, so you can specifically select how you want your seat to behave, or you can set it on auto and it'll read the exterior and interior temperature of the car and adjust your heated and cooled seat and your heated steering wheel, which is 2 levels by the way, accordingly. It works really well. I think these are kind of cool and nice, and ultimately it just is pretty nice. You go into here, your center console on your luxury trims, you'll be able to get a cool box. It's not going to be like a full fridge, but it's nice to have. And you do have a little rubberized dash cubby up here for some added practicality. And it just, again, feels very nice and very Lexus in here. And we're going to talk about cargo capacity. Now, the previous generation GX used to have that swing kind of barn door style gate. We don't have that anymore. What we do still have, though, is the little secret upper glass that opens. This is kind of typical from bigger body on frame SUVs, so I do like to see that, although I will ask everyone in the comments, do you prefer this style or the 4Runner style where it actually goes down into the gate itself? So leave that down in the comments below. Do you have a preference, Paulo?
I prefer the 4Runner style.
4Runner style? I kind of do too. But anyway, it is powered, I promise. Hold on. I didn't have any issues with it.
I've had several. Oh, I know why. I know why. You didn't close the tailgate thing.
Oh, the glass?
Well, we learned
User
something.
error. So this is good journalism because you have to make sure that that glass up there, again, you wouldn't run into this with the 4Runner, it just goes up,
right.
You just know. But anyway, it is power opening now rather than the barn door style. You do have power close and lock, and now I'm being stupid and hitting it again. But with the rear seats up, with this third row, this is the space that you have, which is just insane. I think it's like 10.3 cubic feet of space. Now, I would, again, not get the third row. And what would you look at without the third row?
45.6.
45.6. Now, I'm going to put these down. They are powered, as we saw earlier. Again, kind of pre-production stuff. I've not once gotten them to go down on the first push, but we're going to push it again.
Okay, here we go. So, like I said, 40.2.
40.2 with the third row down. Now this is much more usable. And of course you can drop the rear seats here, but even if you don't get the third row, you're still gonna get the cup holders back here, and I believe some of the outlets as well. But now that we have the third row down, I can show you our little friend here that we've had to leave wherever we are. And then you can finally put your privacy cover back in, which is never a pain. Then we can fold the front row. You can actually kind of lay here. Your head is going to be higher than your feet, but that's kind of how you'd want it. And what kind of space are we looking at with this?
It's basically 77 cubic feet with all of them down, but with everything down in the over trail and no third row, you get 90.5. So obviously a lot more.
That's a lot of space.
Yeah.
So you are going to forfeit a bunch of space getting this third row. Again, I've said it all video. You know what I'm going to say.
Do you think Matt wants a third row, or do you think he does it?
Hard to say. And it wouldn't be a modern luxury car without all of the tech features to go along with it. We'll start with your head-up display, which you have. It shows you your adaptive cruise and your radar suite and all that stuff, along with a bunch of other information. And then down below it, you have a fully digital instrument cluster. And it's got this really cool thing. It's like a privacy screen you'd see on your computer. So when you're sitting in the driver's seat, you can see it, but you come over here, and now all of a sudden, you can't see what's on the screen. Not exactly sure why that would be important, but hey, it's kind of cool. And then also, we kind of ding Toyota for having maybe some not super interesting or a whole lot of information that you can have on your center display, but this has some kind of cool drive animations. You do have a little bit more customizability than you would typically have. This also gets Toyota Safety Sense 3.0, so you've got the eyeball watcher here. It does ding a little bit, but it's a little bit more relaxed than previous models, and I think that that's nice. But here is kind of the main event, and this is your 14-inch Toyota Connect, or whatever they call it, but this is kind of the same technology suite that we've seen, again, with the introduction of the new Tundra. Again, 14 inches, wireless Apple CarPlay, dual Bluetooth connection, over-the-air updates, and it all works pretty well. Pretty snappy, and I just like it. You do have a weird focus on your 12-volt outlet here, but I guess it's kind of nice. And you've also got a wireless charger down here.
Cameras are really good, and I like how they have this button right here. I've been using it literally every time I've pulled into a spot, just because you do sit so high up, and it's kind of hard to know when you're new to it to really understand like how close you are to the lines. And like this, well, not the egg.
The egg view is dumb.
The
but you could at least change the color of the car, which is not the button that I just hit. But you go here, and you can change the color of the car. But then, yeah, you go into reverse, and you do have 360 cameras. And for the over trails, you will have multi-terrain monitor. So you'll have some of these 360 cameras and see your side tolerances when you're off-roading, and I think that'll be really nice.
Feel it, and this is how you remind me.
Demonetized, I'm gonna keep it in the vid.
Just a classic, dude.
Just absolute slap banger. Why did our wives do us dirty in the chat this morning?
Why did they do that to us?
That was unnecessary.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. GX 550. Got some good pep, dude, honestly.
I mean, it's not slow.
No.
It feels good. Loads of torque.
Yeah, and what they did is they actually made the turbos a bit smaller so you get to torque a bit faster, which is nice. You don't have to build as much boost with the smaller turbos.
Can I tell you my favorite thing?
Yeah, I'm glad that you are going to go first.
I'm going to participate this time.
Okay, good.
My favorite thing about this truck is that it doesn't beat you in the head with fake V8 noise.
Yes.
That is my favorite thing about it.
Just all real.
You want to know my second favorite thing?
Are these actually your favorite things?
These are my favorite things.
Okay.
These are just things that I noticed immediately upon getting in this car, and that's what I think is probably the best thing to tell people.
Yeah.
That's what you're going to get when you
right away,
experience
I see what you're saying.
So every video and article and whatever that we've seen about this car has always been like, oh, versus Defender, this is such a Defender, blah, blah, blah. I got in here, I sat right there, and immediately I was like, this feels G-Wagon. This feels way more G-Wagon to me, just in the way that it sits on the interior. The interior feels nicer than a G-Wagon, but it's kind of skinny laterally and super tall headroom-wise, especially from the front. Not so much in the back, obviously, as we saw, but it feels very G-Wagon to me. And I think we should pay attention to that comparison as we're talking about this car in the future.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
So what do you like about this car?
Yeah, well, so I do want to get to your third, but I guess if I were to say two things.
I have to think of a third thing that I like.
We kind of talked about, especially when we were starting, but like the looks, I just think it's incredible. They nailed the design and the proportions of this car. Like it just is just chef's kiss. Really done well.
It looks great.
Then my second favorite thing, I think is kind of to your point, and we did touch on it a little bit. It's just like the usability, practicality of the interior, the tech, but like the physical buttons. They went away from like the haptic feedback, having to mess with like the heads-up display. You have these always-on climate control buttons. Like everything is just so usable. Your camera button's like right here. There's no black piano. Like I just think they took a while to give this thing a refresh.
Yeah.
But they really nailed it. Like I think it has been my favorite experience with like the user interface, the tech, the buttons and all that. In quite some time.
It seems like they did listen to some of the feedback that they've been getting in the last year or two with the new system and everything. So the climate's always here, and it kind of has been in some of the other ones. But like going back to real buttons on the steering wheel, not having to rely on your head-up display.
You have an actual like shifter that you can move around and even put into manual mode.
All of the inputs that they've integrated here fit the personality of this car. Yeah. This is off-road, it's more rugged feeling, like even the cup holder thing, like this feels more rugged to me and just kind of good. And it never comes at the expense, because rugged can also sometimes mean cheap. Like it's an excuse for manufacturers to introduce like plastics and rubbers. Yeah. But it's still Lexus in here, and I love that.
Yes, my third favorite thing, and you might actually say this too, is just for a body on frame, this rides extremely well. And we don't even have the ABS in this. Like I can't imagine how good that adaptive suspension that Lexus has is on this thing. I bet it's incredible.
Yeah, so the thing that I really noticed too, I guess the third thing that I noticed right away is the standard suspension tuning here has loads of travel and rebound, so when you do some of this behind the wheel, it really leans. But the interesting thing is, since you have this kind of raised hood on either side, you can see how much the truck is diving when you're shaking the wheel. But when I'm sitting here, I'm not feeling it to the same degree.
Right.
Like there's a disconnect between how much it's actually doing and how much I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Which I think is a mark of a good suspension system.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So it's dealing with all that stuff out there without translating it to me.
Yeah.
So I think that's really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to say about those 3 points, and it is really good.
Yeah. What do you not like?
Yeah, dislikes, I would say it'd be nice to have a few more engine options. Now, granted, I understand, the first year, like, they're not going to offer it with everything, but it would be nice to see, like, a hybrid option here.
Yeah, I think that was one of the, I guess not a huge surprise to me, but something that kind of caught my eye was just the sense that, like, we've gone away from the previous generation Toyota Lexus where it's all like 6-speed transmissions and big V8s, naturally aspirated engines and stuff, and now we've gone to higher compression, turbocharged, more speeds, and we've only netted 2 mpg better than the outgoing.
And that was the second thing that I disliked, is just I wish that you could get more mpg with this thing. It's just Yeah.
I'm sure we'll get the hybrid. I'm sure it'll come. And I think at that point, even if we introduce just another 2 mpg better, and that's going to bring like almost 600 pound-feet of torque with, you know, maybe another 50 horsepower or so. I forget what the Tundra final output is, but it'll be probably similar to that. I think that would make this very compelling.
Right. My third least favorite thing is just the usability and practicality of the third row. Like, it's almost like they just put a third seat in here just to say it is a third row. Like, in a pinch, it'll be okay, and I do think it's probably more geared towards children, though.
Right.
And you're sacrificing basically all of your trunk space with the third row up.
Right. And I think, so when Toyota brings their Land Cruiser for the US market, I know they've had one for a couple years in other markets, but when they bring the new Land Cruiser that looks more like the old FJ, it's going to be basically this footprint, this chassis and everything, but with the hybrid 4-cylinder and only 2 rows. And I'm really interested to see how I feel about that one, because that basically would address some of the things that I've complained about here. Because it's just the third row is just not necessary. Yeah. Like at all.
I think the last thing I want to mention that I didn't actually have on like my favorites is the driver assist features. Some of them are really actually annoying with like it trying to trying to tell you to pay attention. But the one that I really like and it impressed me was like the lane centering. Was actually proper good. Yeah,
it's usually not as good on the body on frame. It's usually better integrated into the unibody trucks and SUVs and stuff. But here it was pretty good.
No, and it was like picking up lines that like my car and some of the other press cars that we haven't been able to pick up. So like it was doing a pretty good job.
Yeah. No, overall, I really like this thing. I really do. And I'm really excited to get into the over trail and do some off-roading, because I think that's exactly where this thing is going to shine. So with that, I think thank you to you guys for watching. Thank you to Toyota Lexus for letting us have a go in your new GX. It's been great, and we'll see you in the over trail.
Later, guys.